ask you about was the message you got from an anarcho-capitalist. You were telling me about this the other day. Do you remember what he said to you? He said something like, he called you an idiot or something, didn't he?
He said that he said he was an anarcho-capitalist, or he said a social libertarian. And to me, I think it's funny because he's basically trying to separate a social system, from an economic system. But to me, capitalism is not a social system in the fact of it's not for a social good. It's basically a limiting of outside input to, maximize profit.
Yeah.
So the whole premise is not, in a sense, a humanitarian thing, which is why I believe that, most anarchism, which I'm a mutualist in general, most anarchism or even socialism, based on the same premise that why you affect economic systems has to do with the public good, in a sense.
Yeah.
Which capitalism doesn't give a shit about the public good.
Yeah,
capitalism.
You also made the comment, which is good, is that if you're trying to do the most efficient thing in a capitalistic sense, then you just need to own slaves.
Right. And in fact, slaves isn't even the limit to what a capitalist would want, because slaves still need food, need housing. What you actually need is someone else to pay for the housing.
Yeah.
Someone else to pay for the food, which is why I believe actually now what they've done by the prison system is the ultimate proof of capitalism.
So I see it as like the climax of capitalism.
Oh, definitely.
That's what it is. That's where it leads ultimately, because ultimately it's a class war that's taking place. And so obviously the ruling class is going to push in that direction for total and absolute control.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that, like I said, how they set it up now is that we've allowed jails to be made public, entities for profit. So, but it's actually twofold, because there's like 45 major companies now that are actually using prison labor. Yeah, which to me is worse than slave labor.
I see this as like a dystopia, like the future of society. So I can see this, the climax of it, to where you have a society that's regulated and controlled.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And that control comes in the form of the criminalization of the worker, of the poor man, or whatever, so that the ruling class can just basically continue to live the lifestyle that they want to keep on living, which is basically parasitic, living off of the workers, living off of the people. Something else I want to bring up, too, regarding anarcho-capitalism, because this is a subject that's important to me, and the reason it's important to me is because I like the disposition of the anarcho-capitalists. What I mean by that is a lot of them tend to have a revolutionary disposition. I very much like that, but they're some of the most confused people I have ever come into contact with. And the reason I think they're so confused is because they don't understand the system that they try to propagate, which is capitalism.
Right, yeah, but I think that the issue is, like I said, I think that you're talking about revolutionary. A revolution, the goal of a revolution is that a proposition to begin with that something's wrong.
Yeah.
So you have to. I don't understand how an anarcho-capitalist can say capitalism is wrong, and thus I'm going to do a revolution and put capitalism in. I mean, it's
quite backwards. It's quite backwards.
I mean, the whole point is I'm oppressed, and thus I'm going to re-put a system that is oppressive system. I mean, capitalism does not care about the person, so it would always cause revolution in a sense.
In their mind, this is the system of freedom. They think that capitalism is synonymous with freedom. You know this. Yes. And because of this, that is why they think that by empowering it, that they're actually being consistent with the liberal tradition, which is not true. You know this. It's not true.
It's not true.
And in fact, they're actually doing the exact opposite. They're putting a system of suppression and oppression into place that is actually working against, and as we said, like enslaving the people.
Well, right, because it should be its goal. Its goal is profit. Its goal is greed is good.
Yeah.
But the opposite of that is that no, actually, generosity is good. Greed is not.
Yeah. Kropotkin, I believe, proved that in his book, Mutual Aid.
Yeah.
He reverses this idea of this Darwinian survival of the fittest, which is a primitive interpretation of Darwin. But he goes and he takes that idea on in people like Spencer, and he shows that that's actually faulty, that development actually comes by mutual aid, by cooperation.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. This is another thing. So anarcho-capitalism, if we could boil it down, perhaps you would agree with me, I would boil it down to just pure ignorance. That's what it is. They're the anarcho-capitalists.
Yeah, because I agree, it's ignorance. It's ignorance because it's projecting itself as a moral and a social freedom movement.
Yeah.
That's actually an immoral or an amoral, non-moral system, and it's actually more geared towards oppression because it's basically strong survive, whoever has the power. And also it starts with the faulty premise that people can own things, or that who owns things already should keep owning things. When many of the ways people have got accumulated wealth, accumulated power is actually not by a ethical or a justified means.
That's true. You know, I thought about this, and I can try to get this out, this idea that I had the other day. It's kind of a complicated idea in one sense, but I was thinking of ownership, private property, and I was thinking about what gives one person the right to a piece of land over another person. And then I start thinking about this idea of the given. The given is something that a famous philosopher named C.I. Lewis, not to be confused with C.S. Lewis, he put this idea forth. There's the given, and the earth is something that is a given because nobody makes it. It's just something that's here. So it's a strange idea when we say that I have more of a right to this earth than you do, and I have a right to tyrannize you, to oppress you, to cast you out into the desert or whatever it might be, just based on my social status, based on my economic standing or whatever. It's a very strange way to think because we find ourselves here with this idea of the given. The given is here. So why is it that I can't go and do this or can't go and build a house over here with a garden over here and get enough for myself to survive?
Well, I think it goes back to the same thing of the given, and people get into nationalism where they don't realize. I mean, most of the borders, like let's think about Europe. I mean, like most of the borders, have changed, many times in the last 100 years. I mean, not even just one time, many times. So what we think are borders and lines and what's national, this part's mine, or that even going to what a country owns. You're talking about what a person owns.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about what a country owns because to me it really comes back to what a country owns.
Yes.
It's really not what a person owns because most people can be uprooted immediately by the national, culture, and that's why to me putting anarcho-capitalism wants to do a national movement. But to me, it loses the anarchism immediately because anarchism doesn't use nationalism. You're not talking anarchists because anarchists don't believe in borders.
It once again comes back down to ignorance.
Yeah,
with anarcho-capitalists. It comes back down to ignorance. And something I'd want to get across to anarcho-capitalists is that they're not revolutionaries. They think that they're revolutionaries. They use this term. They're not radical. They think they're radical. They're not radical. They're playing directly into the hands of the ruling class. Right. They are the ones who go and propagate the ideology of the ruling class. And there's something I always ask anarcho-capitalists when I see them on the street or meet them anywhere. I always say to them, they say, well, we believe that if we have an anarcho-capitalistic system, we're going to have the maximum amount of freedom. And I say, really? You think that's the case? I say, then tell me this. How are you going to solve the problem of accumulation? Now, they don't understand. When I ask them this question, they're kind of dumbfounded. It flies over their head. They don't understand what I mean. What is the problem of accumulation? The problem of accumulation, as I mean it, is the fact that individuals, corporations, can accumulate large, vast bodies of wealth and pretty much buy the world with it, run the world with it, regulate the world with it, whatever they want to do. In an anarcho-capitalist system, there is no way to stop the accumulation of wealth, period. Because they say, oh, well, we don't believe in coercion. That's their famous term. We don't believe in coercion in any form. Well, then how are you going to stop a person from accumulating and getting vast hoards of money? You can't do it. And so if you allow that system to go on, the world would break up into segments that were dominated by corporations, pretty much.
You're asking about accumulation, but what you're making the presupposition is that once someone has that, they have power. So they're not getting that is what they're saying, because they would admit that money is power to them. And what you're pointing out, which I know how you're saying it, they're not getting it, because you're saying, how do you stop unlimited power? Would be probably better than talking about the money, because really,
in the capitalist system, money is power.
I'm just saying, but I'm saying for them to get what you're saying, because every time the problem is, whenever we talk to them in general, is they keep thinking economics, and you keep talking about humanity. You're talking about a social problem, a humanity problem, an outcome of. What happens when you accumulate wealth is not the act of money. Because they keep going, what's wrong with a lot of money? Well, I'll tell you what's wrong with a lot of money is what it does. It means what you said. It means that you have then not just the ability to go and buy things, but you have the desire to, because you don't want to lose money. The accumulating money is... everyone that's a millionaire doesn't go, I finally arrived.
This is another major problem when I analyze capitalism, just period. I call anarcho-capitalists arco-capitalists. That's the term I usually use to describe them, because I don't believe they're worthy of the name anarchist. So it's an arco-capitalist. They're really just capitalists. That's what they are. Yeah, this idea of accumulation and...
I think it also kind of corporatist, really.
Yeah, corporatist.
Because I mean, who they're really going to protect the best, if it can be said to cause freedom, would be corporations.
In their thinking, in the arco-capitalist thinking, the way that corporate tyranny is regulated is through competition. This is their ideology. It's just their empty ideology. You find this all through the Austrian economists, and what they try to just assert is that if you have a free market with perfect freedom, you will therefore have perfect competition, and that perfect competition will cancel out monopolies. We know that's absolutely not the case. That's absolutely not.
It just breeds more corruption. Just like the one guy about when the banks failed, he said something along the lines that, well, there wasn't laws, so I mean, it wasn't like I was, forced to not do it. You should have made laws, so I can't do it.
Yes.
But that's what happens in anarcho-capitalism. The idea of removing all laws so that money is allowed to freely accumulate. Exactly what you said. But they're not realizing what happens when that happens is that people immediately then become predatory.
Yeah, there's another term that arco-capitalists don't understand, and that term is economic coercion.
Oh, yeah.
That is something that all of them, when I ask them, I say, does economic coercion exist? Well, once again, it's just like the question of accumulation. They're kind of dumbfounded because they can't think about this. It's just like a theist who can't think about questions that contradict his idea of God or his theology. They have a bias almost, something that's, pushing away from that. So I ask them about this. Every time I ask them this idea, they're confused in the sense that they think that all coercion is physical. They don't know that you can leverage a person economically. They say, oh, that's just nonsense. Well, no, it's not nonsense. If you set up the conditions into desperation, you can pretty much force a person, even though you are claiming, oh yeah, this is by their free will. They don't have to work here. They can always go work somewhere else. You've heard this rhetoric before?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
They can always go work somewhere else.
Or they can live in a different country or a different thing.
Nonsense. That's absolutely nonsense. The conditions, the social and economic conditions are manufactured through the system of capital, which creates desperation for the people, and then it forces them into the hands of the capitalists to work for free, to be exploited, to everything else. This is basic economics.
Well, right, and I think also that they take, like you said about, in general, they take a lot of stuff for a given. I heard someone the other day say, well, social programs aren't socialism. I go, well, what part of capitalism is it? Explain to me exactly which part of capitalism believes in helping the elderly.
Yeah.
Giving free things to the poor. What part of capitalism is that exactly? So I think that they're not getting that. I don't think it's full socialism, but to say it's not any part of it, I think is also a complete error. And also, they don't realize, they take for granted. They say, oh, we don't want government, we don't want things, we don't want to do free stuff. Capitalism would have every road a toll road, every road. So the fact that you take freeways or take highways that do not cost you money, you're already using socialism. So, I mean, it's like they don't get if you allow the government to be gone, and you'd say that the corporations are going to somehow altruistically help us, then you're going to have everything cost. I mean, when there's a natural catastrophe, people will be handing out water for $1.50 or $3 because, of course, or maybe $5. How about $10? Because I mean, you have no choice. Like you said, they're using economic, leverage against you. Because if you're in a natural catastrophe and you're dying of water, and someone has water, they tell you it's going to be $50, you're going to have to pay.
This brings us, at the end of the day, to the conclusion that anarcho-capitalism is really a type of morality. It's a moral system.
It's an immoral system.
Well, it's an immoral system, but it is they're trying to push a morality.
Oh, they're trying to push
capitalism. They're trying to say that if a certain individual owns a plot of land, that individual has the right, this is where the moral comes in, that individual has the right to do a certain thing with that land. And the other thing where the morality comes in is in the way a human being should conduct themselves, the way they should form themselves in society, submit to the ruling class, whatever it might be. And this is just old aristocratic values recycled. Nietzsche pointed this out long ago. But you bring up a very good point that I wanted to touch on. I forgot a second ago, but I remembered. This idea that anarcho-capitalists and capitalists in general, they don't look at the social value of things. That's an excellent point. They just look at the economic value. That's very deceptive because if you start a social program, and you say this social program is running at a deficit now.
Yes.
Well, yeah, that might be the point of the social program because it has a social value as opposed to an economic value.
Exactly. That's why I laugh when they say that we're going to run out of money for, say, Social Security. I'm like, yeah. What's so funny to me is we never run out of money for war. I mean, no matter how much it costs, we will. And what's funny too is that people say like, socialism doesn't work. Really? Because do you realize we owe more money to China, I think, than isn't anywhere else? And that's a communist country.
Well, the paradox is that of capitalism now is that socialism is the only thing that's preventing it from a total collapse.
I totally agree.
Yeah, social intervention, social programs that are assisting people so they can actually survive and not feel the full brutality and sting of capitalism. We were talking about this earlier. A prime example of where capitalism manifests its chaos is in the health system.
Oh, yeah.
What it does, all medications
it's immoral.
Hijacked up thousands of times beyond their cost price.
Yeah, I was going to tell you about the saline water drip, bag, and it's like $1 or something for it, and yet they'll charge anywhere from $300 to $800, depending on where it's at. It's just fleecing people because it goes back, like I said, it goes to if someone's in a natural catastrophe and you have the only water. I mean, you could humanitarian, which I would do, just give it to them out of care. But you could charge, $100 for a bottle of water because I mean they have to have it. They will die.
Rothbard actually makes that analogy in one of his books. He talks about a man that owns a plot of land that has the last well or spring on it. And that man has the moral right to be able to charge whatever he wants to charge for that water.
That sounds like capitalism.
If they can impose this ideology, this doctrine in people, and get them to submit to the morality of it, then the people say, oh yeah, that guy has a right to do that. Well, why does he have a right to do that? Because we all have to live here. At a point in time, society has to make a choice for its own existence and longevity.
The thing that they try to do is act like they're talking about a social system, but it's an economic one. But it's actually even a disingenuous one because, like you said, to fill the bite of it, I mean, we really don't have pure capitalism. I mean, in fact, that's why we had to make social programs because pure capitalism is horrid.
Yes.
And then even with the social programs that we did, even with some of the checks and balances we did, look at what happened with the collapse. I mean, it's capitalism whenever it's not watched.
Oh, that's what I was going to say.
Will just eat itself.
This idea of the chaos of capitalism, using the health system as an example, we can see that it's the nature of capitalism to manufacture monopolies, and those monopolies won't be stopped, and you can see that very clearly in the medical. They'll charge whatever they can at that point because it's such a rare service or because they have the monopoly in it. that's just a problem. The very nature of the system is to build monopolies.
The whole medical system in general is bizarre, because even though you get charged, say, a lot for a doctor, it doesn't mean that doctor is actually even getting all the money. So even the capitalists, the goal would be to own a hospital, charge whatever, pay the doctors almost nothing, and charge the people almost everything.
Now, I know the Anarcho-Capitalists, they believe that they can defend and sustain their position. I know this. And the way they do it is they try to talk about the nature of authority and the burden of proof of authority. That's all fine, but then they make a non sequitur leap. The very thing that they're attacking, which is this idea of authority, unjustified force or coercion, is the very thing that they are empowering with their ideology of anarcho-capitalism. They just don't realize it because they're thinking on a very small microeconomic scale. They can't see the big picture, and that's a major problem. For them, it's as simple as making an unregulated market, which doesn't exist. That's a myth in the first place. But ideologically, with their ideology, if you put an unregulated, quote-unquote, free market in place, that will magically correct the world. It will infiltrate the world with a utopia, basically, in their mind.
The only thing I would question is that you said a utopia. I don't think they even think it's a utopia. I don't even think they're that altruistic. I think that you're giving them too much credit. No, they know that bad things will happen. They try to justify it's okay because that's the nature of reality. So they're making an epistemic thing about reality. Well, everyone's going to suffer, so they don't even try for altruism. I think that's more of a socialist idea to try to get to some kind of a happiness or utopia. I don't think capitalism has that goal. Capitalism says that, because capitalism knows a few will not be happy. It just says that, well, they don't deserve it.
So what they don't see is they don't see that as things continue to go on and as things continue to increase, what will happen is that these individuals who accumulate wealth will continue to obtain more and more power. And as they obtain that power, they will subjugate and buy the system. And once they buy the system, you have total corruption throughout the system.